Hello, Jon Bass. Welcome back to Rule the Roost podcast, mate. We're going live this week, aren't we? Aren't we? Oh, so Gen Z
We're so
going
cool.
live on
Yeah, done with the
streams.
kids.
I know. I
Yeah, I
know that. I
mean,
know they're all going to be saying you're cringe. You're doing it on YouTube, not on Twitch or whatever. So
yeah,
you know,
we
but
whatever the latest trend is, we've obviously missed it. So we're behind. We're basically Facebook posts that you see on Instagram that kids posted like 3 months ago on Snapchat that they got from younger kids from TikTok 4 months before. That's
yeah.
us. That's where we are right now.
Have you seen this? Yes, Dad. It was from 2019. It's like the Fenton dog video. Do you
Yeah,
know what I mean? That.
Boris hanging from that zip line.
Yeah. I like the thumbnail. Did you like the thumbnail before this? Three hairy men.
Really nice. I think my catchphrase would be "No beard, no pie." That's got to
Yeah,
be
I'm.
strap line.
My bit. It's more sort of designer stubble. I think I'd call mine,
Mm.
but you know,
I'm thinking
not
about growing
full.
mine out, going full wizard at the moment. It's getting very long, but
Really,
yeah.
but are we talking like full grown out, like when it gets all straggly at the end, so you're not even like tailoring it, if you like.
I think it would get to a point where I'd be like, I'm going to have to buy some beard oil and do this properly. But I do this all the time, Jack. I get to a point where I just go, right, I just grow it really long because I see all these like big, hard gym blokes. They've got really big
Mm.
beards. And I'm like, yeah, that could be me. And then I forget, well, I could probably get the beard, but the gym body is very far away. So you're just a fat bloke with a really big beard. So I'm like,
Oh,
maybe I'll just give it a swerve.
you're doing yourself a disservice there, John. You've trimmed down a lot, mate. You've been doing a lot of running and all that. But we're not here to talk about that. We're not here to talk about beards and any of that. As you can tell, we're probably trying to avoid the latest disaster class at Stamford Bridge. Let me put to you just like in straightforward terms, John. How were you feeling last night in the aftermath of the match, and how are you feeling now having slept on it?
So I'll go straight to the aftermath of the match. I was absolutely fucking raging. I was not a happy bunny. And that's, to be honest, that's not actually been my typical position after defeats, including after the scum at the weekend. I've been able to be pretty zen about the way things are. And today I do feel better because that's been my general position, which is that I'm trying to see the bigger picture with what, not just with what Ange is doing, but where the club is realistically at and what we can hope to achieve over the next few years. And so in the moment, yeah, I get really, really cross and really annoyed. And I still see problems and issues that are Ange's fault. I see issues with the players, I see issues with the club and the amount we spend on players. I see all these issues all the time. I'm not unlike anyone else in the fan base to that extent, right? I don't think if you support the club, you can't be annoyed when a goal goes in, right? Or you concede something stupid that you think is obviously able to be fixed. But I just am able to rationalize it better than I have done previously because I've been able to look at the
I
context of what
thought you were about to say I can rationalize better than other people can. I think, oh God, he's firing shots straight off.
no,
Like,
no. Look, everyone has to deal with it their own way, and I do sometimes feel. And I had someone say, like, "Oh, I heard you recently saying about people who don't like Ange. It was very condescending." I was thinking, I don't remember saying that, and I guess like it can be easily construed that way if you're. And I think you mentioned it before, right? There's a lot of people are like, "Oh, I don't know why everyone's getting so stressed out. Just relax." Like, and there's this almost sort of it is condescending of like, "Oh, are you getting emotionally involved with your football club? What are you, some sort of idiot? Like, why can't you just handle your emotions?" And I'm really trying not to be that guy because I can only talk for myself, right? And I just kind of I just have managed to rationalize it better than I have done previously because I'm really trying to look at things in context. And it's very easy to conflate, I think, and I've done this before as well, the patience being applied to what we're seeing now when we've had a 20 plus year period where if you just go, well, why should I be patient? It's been 20 years. Yeah, absolutely. It's like the blood will boil, right? And you'll be fuming about the situation. But Ange hasn't been here for 20 years. He's
yeah,
just got here and he's just lost the best striker, one of the best players the club's ever seen, and is trying to implement the complete polar opposite system. And we know his system takes at least a year and some transfers and different players. So if you look at it like
can I
that,
just?
you got to have some patience, right?
I'm not saying you're doing this, but
Mm.
all I'm saying is certain people went hard this summer saying it's a blessing in disguise that we've lost Harry Kane. He's not suited to Ange's system. He won't press. He won't understand the complexity of what Ange wants to do with a fluid 3. And now there's a lot of people falling back on, well, he lost Harry Kane. What's he supposed to do? So I think what gets people's go quite a bit is I do think there's a level of hypocrisy. And I do think there's and this irritates me. This isn't just me projecting. One thing that irritates me, because I do have my main concern about Ange, my main concern about how the season's sort of turning out is that I think our trend has been a downward one, right? We have been in decline. And that's results you can kind of reconcile. If you get bad results, but you've been playing well, you can kind of be like, well, I see what we're doing and I see what we're trying to do. I think our performance levels have actually been quite bad. I think Chelsea last night, I don't actually think we were that bad. I've seen some people say that's as bad as I've ever seen us at Stamford Bridge. I don't agree with that. I think it was just meh is the kind of term. But I think what does kind of rankle a bit is it's somehow treated as like an intellectual competition as to whether or not you're frustrated with what Spurs do. I think in particular, it was after the North London derby, which there was a lot of Spurs fans policing other Spurs fans who were just, they were losing their asses, but they were losing their ass after seeing us concede 3 goals at home to Arsenal, which I think if a Spurs fan is going to get wound up by a game, that's probably the one. And I think, there needs to be a bit more needs to be a bit of a separation between lumping anyone that has any kind of concern with what they're seeing right now into this kind of homogenous group of like bad people that don't get it and don't want Spurs to succeed or whatever. And equally, I think that works both ways. I think there's also a loud element of people that will say, well, you can see the sort of fans that think there is some hope in what's going on right now. They're the type of weak mentality people that see this club win nothing. We know what it is. Like, football discussion is always polarized. It's always this type of thing. I think there are certain narratives that I'm struggling with right now. And this isn't something you said, but one of them I'm seeing already is that Ange doesn't have the players. We need that full squad rebuild. I mean, we're already, I would say, 2/3 of the way through a squad rebuild. I don't know how much weight that carries. A lot of these players are new players. A lot of them have been added to the squad. He has been given some money. He has been backed. He has added players to this team. So I get that it is still a work in progress, but I don't fully buy that what we're seeing right now is just a result of him not having all the players that he wants, because we've seen this team play very well. We've seen these players look inspired, look motivated, look like they have a point to prove. And the worrying thing I think about the sort of tail end of the season is that little spark seems to have gone. I think you could have from the outside looked at a club like Chelsea, right? Chelsea, who have not been doing very well this season. And I agree, because a lot of people are saying, why after this game are Sky Sports focusing on Tottenham Hotspur, saying, look how terrible Spurs are, look what a bad season Ange Postecoglou's had, and then essentially pouring praise onto Pochettino, onto Chelsea, you look like you're kind of galvanizing this young group of players and all this type of thing. And they're about 9 points behind us still. And I do get why that frustrates people, but I can kind of almost understand, because Chelsea, I think their league position, and Flav talks about this a lot on Fighting Cock and the various other sort of like side pods and things, and that with the tactics type people and things, but that Chelsea have probably been better than their league position suggests. I'm not 100% sure you can say that of Spurs. Like, I don't... all the sort of talk of us getting into the Champions League and everything, we haven't looked like a Champions League team at all this season. I think it would be far too early for us to get into the Champions League. I think that would make somebody like Daniel Levy think, well, actually, I think Ange is doing all right here. Maybe he doesn't need quite as much money as we think he does. I think if Spurs start falling down the league a few positions now, and I know people are going to dig me out, say, oh, you're hoping. I'm not hoping for a Spurs loss, but if Spurs probably settle in a position that's more reflective of how they've played across the balance of an entire season, which maybe we'll see us drop beneath Man United, might even see us drop beneath Newcastle. then hopefully that will give the powers that be within the kind of club enough of a kick up the arse to say, no, it's not done yet. He does need more support. He does need more players behind him. However, to sort of wrap this sort of waffle into more of a succinct point, with the fact that Spurs' kind of performances have started to trend downward, is there any concern on your part as to whether or not we should be backing Ange Postecoglou, whether we should be saying, here's 150, 200 million pounds to spend, you're our guy? And equally, not even just from you, Jon Bass's perspective, do you think the club, do you think Daniel Levy might actually be, because Ange isn't going to get sacked in summer. Some people say he should go in summer. We should build. Nah, I mean, the club doesn't need that chaos. We don't need to be going through this again because it's only going to be Thomas Tuchel. It's only going to be Thomas Tuchel. Like, we can't be expecting anything else. But can you see the club backing him, or do you think they might lose their arse a little bit as well?
So yeah, to go through this, I think basically
go through this waffling shite.
So I've made three points here. One is about does ending badly mean that he's doing badly and therefore there's no momentum? The squad rebuild, and is it really still need work, or should he be doing better with that? And then finishing lower in the league, what does that mean? So just to go back to like the momentum, have we lost momentum? Because those first 10 games were unbelievable, right? And I was seeing football there that I was like, yes, this is the type of football that I want. This is the type of like team I want us to be, and I want us to try and play this way where we're an attacking side, scoring goals, and attacking is the priority, right? That's what I wanted. Now, if I can cast your mind back to when Conte was at the club, even when he was doing well, you and I had a couple of conversations where we were like, I just don't like the football. I just don't get what are automations. I'm not sure about this. I don't see this doing like this ever being something that we're going to enjoy, but maybe it'll bring us success, right? And in his first season, what happened? Second half of the season, we were great. Went on a great run, momentum, right? Finished the season really strong. Now I've been told on Twitter all day, if you don't finish the season well, that's it. Like there's not going to be any momentum going into next season. Now, we had great momentum with Conte going into the following season, and it didn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Didn't mean a single thing. And you could have said, look at the players, they're bought into it. We're doing great. We finished in the Champions League. This is brilliant. This is going to work. Just because there's momentum in a short-term space, which is second half of the season, or a downturn in second half of the season, that doesn't always indicate future results. And there's loads of examples of it, like Arteta at Arsenal. And I know people don't like this example. And there's obviously the Guardiola and Klopp ones are more famous, but I think the Arteta one is more accurate because Arteta had lots of stuttering moments dotted in and around before these last two seasons where he's found some consistency. And he's turned over a lot of players, a lot. So to the second point about squad rebuild, yeah, I think there's loads of players that need to be brought in and loads of players that need to go out because we are essentially in year one of the players he wants. So he's only really been able to have, a bit of the summer because we only lost Kane at the end of the window. So he didn't even have real chance to replace. And January, which is a nightmare. So this will be his first proper summer of like transfers. And they're going to need a couple more windows. So the squad turnover is going to be big. I don't think there's this idea that just because we like fall off in the season that means that the players aren't bought in, or that. And again, I'm not saying you're saying that, but that's the kind of narrative is like, oh look, this is trending the wrong way. And it's like, sure, but I think we've seen the type of football that he can achieve. So if we can get back to playing nice football and you bring in a few more players and you can re-galvanize over the summer, who knows? Maybe it goes even worse and he gets fired by January. Fine. But at this point in time, I want to see that.
November's the date everyone's setting, isn't it? They're saying he's gone by November.
Yeah. And look, the thing is, I think people confuse like my support of Ange at this moment with like blind faith of like, it doesn't matter. I don't care what happens. He's my guy. It's like, no, he's my guy at the moment because I don't understand the alternative option.
Yeah.
Right. Which is that he plays great football. Tick. He seems like a nice, stand-up, decent person as a figurehead for the club. Tick. He gives basically a feeling that he wants to be at the club, which is another massive thing that you and I had a big problem with Conte, that we were doing him a favour and that Tottenham Hotspur, the great institution, wasn't good enough for him. And Ange doesn't give me that. Ange gives me someone who's proud to be the manager of our club. So those things are there, but he has to deliver on the pitch. Like, he has to. We can't. I don't want all of that and then just to finish like 10th. I want to be successful alongside it, but I understand that you have to give him a certain amount of time, because otherwise, what we're saying is every time you bring a new manager in, they have to win the league in their first season. Yeah, they have to. Otherwise, they're not doing enough. They're not showing enough. I don't think this guy's a winner, because most of the time you're not going to win the league in your first season. So what we have to give a chance for people to build, and that is several seasons. It just is. Like, we're not Man City, where you bring in another manager, maybe they just inherit that squad and they win something. We all understand this squad is not ready. You said it yourself. It's not ready for the Champions League. It's not. So we need to build it to be ready for the Champions League, and then we need to build it to be ready to challenge for the league. That takes several seasons. Now, he might not get the chance to do that because he might not be the right person. But at this moment in time, just starting again, to me, makes no sense whatsoever. So again, I'm not telling people how to think or not to be angry. That's just how I rationalize it, right? How I look at it is just that you've got to look at the things you want in terms of the way that you play football and the things that you're aiming for. And then, do you think this person can achieve it? Lots of people are saying, I don't think he can, which is completely fair enough. That is completely fair position to be like, I don't think he will. But I think we don't know, because he haven't had enough time to really actually assess that. In the same way as if you'd have said at the end of the season when Conte finished 4th, do you think this guy is going to give us success? Loads of people would have said yes. Most people would have said yes. And that was a fucking disaster. So we just don't know. So just give him time. That's kind of my overarching theme here, is like, I don't know. Nobody knows. But I'd rather give this guy a chance to find out, because when it's been good, it's been the type of good that I want.
Got a few comments in here. James Reed, first of all, says, give us some hope, lads. And then says, I think this fixture was the tip of the iceberg for a lot of Ange loyalists. I'm still a believer in the project, but the drop in form since the Chelsea loss in November is hard to rationalise, which is followed up by Dwade3, who says 34 points in our last 24 games is utterly abysmal. If we hadn't had that amazing 10-game run at the start, our points per game would put us 11th, 1 point behind Bournemouth. I mean, that is pretty terrible.
But we did have the 10 points. We did win those games. So you can't just go, if we didn't.
It is that kind of thing, isn't it? It's the, if my mum had wheels, she'd be a bicycle type thing,
Yeah,
or whatever
exactly.
it is, the old saying, De Campo. Hacker BLCPS says, Ange just went through the Conte experience. This squad can't maintain levels for a full season. Full rebuild incoming. Now, I mean, I guess let's dive into this, John, because you sort of made the point there, and Hacker's making this point right now. For me, I'm looking across our squad. I'm saying Vicario, brand new goalkeeper, Pedro Porro, brand new right back, right wing back, whatever you want to call him. Romero, Van der Ven, part of the rebuild. Destiny Udogie, part of the rebuild. Basuma, still a new player. People might not be overly happy with his performance levels right now, but still a fresh new face about the place. Sarr, similar. Bentancur only bought a season and a half ago. Look further forward, Brennan Johnson, brand new player. Richarlison, pretty much a brand new player. Maddison, effectively a brand new player. Sonny, yep, he's one of the old stalwarts of the team. Timo Werner, we've got also in there playing a part. So, I mean, the only players really are Sonny, Højbjerg, and Ben Davies occasionally, Emerson Royale occasionally, who are what you would say is part of the old generation players. When we're talking about like a full rebuild, how many times are we rebuilding this squad? Because it almost feels like the discussion is still stuck in 3-4 years ago, when Pochettino's just been given the boot, and we've still got, a lot of kind of the old guard all still hanging about the place. This does feel like the squad is rebuilt. It feels like it's halfway rebuilt. We need some more options. We need more rotations. Definitely, most notably, I think personally, like Udogie and Porro, there's no backup for them, no viable alternatives for the pair of those two, for positions that are so integral to this system, so integral to what Ange Postecoglou wants to do. The fact we have no viable backups to those two is mad to me. we definitely, if we want to play this way and if we want to, and people can laugh, people can scoff, but if the ambition is to win the Premier League, win the Champions League, or compete for the Champions League, we need that Declan Rice, Rodri level midfielder. We need that powerhouse midfielder. I don't know who that is. A lot of people seem to fancy Onana at Everton. I mean, I'm not overly sure on that one, to be honest with you. But we need somebody, and people say, yeah, who? Yeah, maybe there's someone playing in La Liga or the Bundesliga or whatever. That I don't know. That's not my job. I'm not a scout. I'm a man that podcasts in his spare room. Do you know what I mean? That's what I am. What is a rebuild, John? Like, what? I mean, are we saying James Maddison's not good enough? Are we saying Kulusevski just bought a season and a half ago isn't good enough? Brennan Johnson, £60 million we spent on him this summer. I look at, I hate sort of jumping on the bandwagon and digging the lad out, but there's that part of me that thinks 50, 60 mil we spent on Brennan Johnson, right? Blocking a pathway for somebody like a Noni Madueke, who is playing for Chelsea now, who looks better than Brennan Johnson. It's kind of mad, really. I mean, what does this rebuild that Hacker's sort of talking about look like to you? I mean, what do you think we need? Who goes? What do we bring in? We don't need to do it player by player. I know I've just sort of gone through it there, but that was just to demonstrate that a lot of these players are new. It does feel like the squad is or has been rebuilt to a certain extent.
Yeah, so I think you're right. Like, I don't think that we're at the beginning of the rebuild, right? Because, as you quite rightly said, if you were rebuilding a wall and you knocked it down, started with nothing, and then you laid the first 2 rows of bricks, it's not starting again, is it? You've got those row of bricks. You now need to decide what you do next. So there is an element of we have to still bring in new players. Like we absolutely do need to bring in new players, because I think you're right. Like, there's rotation options, for example, for the fullbacks. As soon as those two are out, Porro and Udogie, the drop off is massive, right? So like that is actually a really good example of Ange specific, because some of the players that are part of the Tottenham rebuild aren't part of Ange's, I hate the word, but Ange's project. He inherited them. So they might be new to the club, but they're not his players. And if they don't fit his system, this is the ultimate test for me, is will the club support Ange in going, I know you just spent 50 million 2 summers ago. I want him out. I want him gone, because he's never going to play for me. It doesn't suit the way I play. I'm sorry that you've spent this money, but this is what we need to be successful. This is where the sort of purple and gold, or even sort of more of the Levy critical people, are correct, which is that it doesn't really matter what manager you have. If you don't fully back that manager's project and the players that he wants, and prepared to lose money on players he wants out, we'll always have a bit of a glass ceiling that will stop us pushing forward. Because part of me looks at the players that we have got, and I just sort of think, like, one, we might have spent money on them and they might be new, but if they're not good enough, it doesn't matter. Just because we spent a lot of money, doesn't mean that they're necessarily guaranteed us to be better as a result of it, right? Like, some of the best players we had in even the Pochettino teams weren't expensive. Like, Dele Alli was just plucked from like League One, and would have, if you tried to buy a player like he was in his pomp for us, you'd have been talking nearly 100 million. So
I mean, people have forgotten, like, people have short memories, actually, quite how good Dele was. Like,
I mean, I could talk for a whole hour on how ridiculous Dele Alli was. But my point remains, is that if you sign a player like Dele, or sign a player who's worth 60 million, and the 60 million player is just trash, or is not going to cut it, you have to cut your losses, right? Like, in the industry that I work in, which is like technology, there's lots of startups, right? And like, one of the like phrases that gets thrown out all the time is like, you can fail, but just fail fast. So in other words, if you're going to make a decision on someone, just do it quick. Like, you can make the wrong hire and bring in the wrong person. If they're not good, just get them out, because the longer you wait and decide, and that is what Tottenham have been historically very, very bad at. And we keep players for too long, and we hope they're going to turn out. The amount of people going, oh, Lo Celso needs a run. Fucking pointless. Pointless. He's been there too long. We know he's not good enough, but we desperately hope that he will just magically become good. He won't. He won't. And there's loads of players like that we know aren't good enough, that need to go. And I think this will be a big this will be a big part of Ange's success, is what the club does. And I am heartened a little bit by the fact that we've got this new sort of recruitment setup team that has somewhat isolated itself from Levy. And I think actually the recent signings they've made, you mentioned like Vicario and Udogie, that does seem to like lend itself to them making better decisions. But fundamentally, and I said this on the Fighting Cock the other day, Sonny,
No plugs to them on here, mate. No
Sorry,
plugs.
mate. I said it on another well-known Spurs podcast.
Bad one. Crap.
Yeah.
Full of wankers.
Yeah, full of pricks. Is that we basically have some really good players. We have like Sonny, I think's like been outstanding and is outstanding. We have Romero. I think Vicario has been a really good sign, Van der Ven, etc. But if you really think about it, and if you're really honest about it, and you take out, I mean, me and you love Sarr, for example. I think he's a great, promising young talent. But if you compare like Maddison to the teams that we want to finish above, so we want to finish in the top, like the top 3 places, let's say, right? So you've got Arsenal and City currently. They've got Odegaard, and then Man City have got any number, like pick out of their ridiculous players, right? And I know it's a harsh example because Man City, but that's who we are competing against.
Yeah.
James Maddison gets nowhere near that. He doesn't. Like, he's a really good player, and I really like him. I'm not saying we should sell him, but I'm saying, like, we need to, if we really want to step up, we need to find someone that he's the rotation option. He's not the starter. We need to switch our mentality and be like, okay, who do we bring in that's better than James Maddison? So Maddison can come on. At the moment, we have Maddison and then Lo Celso. Like, that's not really good enough if you want to compete. We don't have a holding midfielder, right? We've got Basuma and Højbjerg. Højbjerg, and maybe I am emotional from last night, is a complete waste of time.
Because I cannot wait till he's out of the club.
Oh, God, honestly. And like, just get him out my sight. Sick of him. Basuma, like we all thought, okay, promising. Like he looked great at Brighton. I only ever watched him when they beat Arsenal, which was like once a year, and he looked great. And look, I still think there's a player there. But realistically, if you want to become a top side, he is not good enough for us to play every week to win the league. Now, I'm not saying this makes it sound like, oh, get Basuma out, he's shite. I'm not saying that. I'm saying he's really, really good, but he's not really good enough. He's not. If you really want to kick on, you do need a Rodri. You do need a Rice. That's why Arsenal spent 100 million on Rice, because they knew it. You need elite level to compete with elite level, and they might not even win the league, and they've still got better players in the centre of their midfield. So look, this makes it sound like I'm basically saying all of our players are shy and they're rubbish and they're not good enough. And I guess in some instances, I am sort of like saying that players could be better. I don't want that to be confused with me saying this squad is absolute shite, we need to get rid of all of them and rebuild. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is, though, if you really want to kick on to the next level, it does need big investment, and it needs investment in the right areas. And the players I think we thought were like, oh my God, yes, these guys are the ones who are going to elevate us. They might be the ones before the ones who will elevate us. And sometimes these players aren't expensive. Like I said, you buy an Eric Lamela for whatever we spent on him, 37 million. Thinking, yes, this is going to be the guy. Absolute shite. You buy Dele Alli from League One, and suddenly he's the guy. And you're like, great, don't have to worry about that anymore. He's the guy. So it's not about mega money spending, but I do think we really have to think about smart signings that will improve things. Because currently, man for man, I just don't think we're able to compete. And if you look at that based on where we're probably going to finish, I think Ange's done a pretty good job. And that's another reason why I'm just not that concerned, because I think that people keep saying, and I keep hearing it floating around, I don't think even with better players we'd play better. We fucking would. We would. Just put better play. Put Rodri, De Bruyne, and Odegaard in our midfield. We would be much better. You cannot tell me we wouldn't be. We'd be loads better. We also need a striker, because Son, like, he can obviously do a job there when you need to for 10 games a season against the right opposition. Richarlison, he did great at Everton to keep them up, but he's never been like a prolific goal scorer. He tries hard, he works hard, great, but he's not getting in those other teams, is he? Realistically. So we need to find someone who can. I mean, there's that lad in Germany, English lad. He'd have been all right. Harry Kane. He'd have done a job for us, I reckon. So it's this kind of stuff, mate. I sort of feel like, Ange, if you do think about, people can't have it both ways, I think. You can't go, oh, these players are crap, they're not good enough, we need a rebuild. And then go, yeah, and Ange, I don't think this system's going to work. You're like, well, we're not bottom. Something is working, right? And if you think the players aren't quite cutting it, which is I think there's definitely some upgrades to be made across the squad. I think Ange's done a pretty good job to keep us where we are. And I know people say, but the trend is bad. Yeah, but we absolutely annihilated teams in the first 10 games. So somewhere in the middle is where we should be, and then you need to improve on that.
Can I dive into your thoughts on Maddison a bit? Because there's this intrusive thoughts, John. You know intrusive thoughts as well as anyone, right? There's this little bit of me that's like, is this a bit of a Clint Dempsey? In that, remember Clint Dempsey, right? Tore it up at Fulham, looked absolutely sensational, and all of the talk was always he's going to get that move to. He was always linked to Liverpool. There was a bit of talk about Manchester United coming in for him, and then I think Spurs are the one that were finally like, we're going to be the ones to take on Clint Dempsey, take him to the next level. Clint Dempsey, and sorry, Americans, I know you don't like it when I don't shower him in praise, but Clint Dempsey wasn't bad for Tottenham. He wasn't bad at all.
Yeah, he was fine.
But suddenly, when he took that little step up, you were suddenly like, oh, do you know what I mean? And are we seeing that with Maddison a little bit? Are we kind of seeing now why he didn't get that? Remember at the start of the season, we were like, I can't believe Man City or Liverpool or nobody's come in for him. And it's like, remember when Mo's eating the misshapen Oreos and he's like, what's wrong with that one? Oh, are we kind of hitting that moment now with Madders a little bit, or is that harsh? Is that just nasty, intrusive thinking doing me and James Maddison dirty there?
So I think like if you look at Maddison, like you look at what I've been saying about Spurs, which is that this downward trend doesn't mean that he just continues to get worse over time. And by in a couple of years he ends up playing down Waltham Forest with me. I think basically he is much better than his form has been recently. But I think the issue with him is that you always get these bad bouts of form. And I can't remember what pod it was on, but I listened to something recently where, like, actually, it might have been yours, Jack, where someone was saying he basically has like 3 spells in a season: one where he's amazing, one where he's out of form, and one where he's injured. And it's like you get that every season with him. So that's just, you have to just deal with that. And it's like, and this is what I'm saying about whether or not you're, as a team, as a fan base, and as a manager, if you have the tolerance to go, fine, that guy is the one we're going to rely upon to be the creative force in this entire squad, which is what we're currently doing. Or where you go, when he's great, he's great. So we need a player like that in the squad to be able to unlock certain things. And what a nice option. If City bought Maddison as an option and he played, like 10 games and played like the first 10 games, you go, wow, what a signing. Of course he's there. But because we rely on him every week, and he's basically the only creative midfielder, it's so stark when he's not on it that part of me is like, this is actually doing him a disservice. We don't have anyone else to rely upon. And there is so much around with footballers that, like, the way, not just their individual performance, but you'll often see, like with centre backs, he's all right, and then they bring another centre back, and suddenly the original one looks amazing, because you're like, yeah, because sometimes it's just chemistry with certain positions, and midfielders, when they get a holding midfielder, it like unlocks their talent and gets more out of them. Same with strikers and wide players and all that kind of stuff. I do feel like there's not enough technicians in our squad generally, and not enough technicians in midfield. So he doesn't. It's like we're not helping him. We're not getting the best out of him. And I think we also do a disservice by only having him to rely upon. And that's why when people talk about like Eze, I'm like, that makes a ton of sense to me, because he's also injured quite a lot. So between the two of them, you get enough for one season, right? But yeah, I guess my overarching point with everything Maddison is, do I think he's a good player? Yeah, I really do think he's got a lot of talent and is really decent. His injury thing is quite annoying, that he's quite lightweight and he gets injured quite a bit, quite regularly, which is quite annoying. The form at the moment, I've heard rumours, and it's the usual football thing of, he's got a bit of an injury, he needs to have surgery, he doesn't want to have it till after the Euros, and then people go, yeah, but he's not going to get picked for the Euros, and it's like, yeah, but he doesn't know that yet, does he? So he's trying to get through it. If that's the case, it's annoying, because just to have the surgery and play better for Spurs, because I don't care about England in the summer, you need to be better now, and it's going to give you the best chance to be decent at the start of the season. next season. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not saying Maddison's rubbish. I'm also not saying he's the best thing since sliced bread. He's very, very good. He's better than what we had previously in that position because we had no one. But one isn't enough. And even in the summer, I think people were saying that, right? Like, it's great that we've got Maddison, but like, who else have we got in the squad? Kulusevski looks okay in the middle. He had a shocker last night, and you get that from him every now and again, where he looks terrible. He can't control a football, and there's a difference between the Conte signings like Kulusevski, who in a more robust team, Højbjerg's another one, that look all right because of the way that we play. This style of football requires technicians, really, really good technical players. And even Son, who is one of our best players, isn't very technically gifted. A ball bounces off him a lot, always has done. But because of the way we played, it didn't really matter. But now it does matter. And so I think this is why, to go full circle on Maddison and rebuilds, we do need to look at the type of player that we sign to give Ange the best chance of being successful.
But this is the funny thing with Ange, because you would say, right, and I'm going to chuck a stat at you as well, mate. One of the most technically gifted players probably in our squad, and I've dug him out, and in the past and everything, but Giovani Lelo, right? You know, the sort of the function he has in the Argentinian national team. Close control is very good. He's very good at the fundamentals. Do you know what I mean? Receiving the ball, playing crisp, clean passes, good direction, good vision. He's a very sound technical footballer. No Tottenham Hotspur player created more chances last night than Giovani Lelo, who created 3, despite him being introduced in the 86th minute. There's been some talk that we're actually going to try and convince him to stay, yet Ange Postecoglou, who is constantly tweaking the midfield, doesn't seem to. And I don't say this as a criticism, because I couldn't tell you what our best midfield is really at all. And there's probably something in that. That's probably a problem. I mean, definitely is. But the fact that he still doesn't seem to sort of give Lo Celso any minutes whatsoever is strange. But you know, I can't now as the master of that one, because Lo Celso for me is that player who looks great in these cameos, and then you trust him, you give him an opportunity, and he disappears. And Kulusevski, I love the lads. I love his spirit. I love his endeavor. I love his toil. He was so important when we had all those players injured. He was giving it 120% every single game, right? And it feels like he does all these kind of supporting roles really well. And he really tries, because it's like he's trying to impress to earn that chance to play centrally, to sort of usurp Maddison. And he got given that last night. And again, like you say, he kind of shrunk. Do you think it's a mentality thing with him?
Yeah, I mean, there has to be something to it. I mean, I think like he's another one. He's clearly a really good player with good attributes. But he just so often just has these like random performances where you're like, where is this? He was really good against Arsenal in a team that wasn't playing particularly great as a unit. I thought he individually was very good. He was really like making things work. He looked dangerous. He was holding the ball up. He was bringing other players in. But in this game, he was absolutely diabolically bad. Like, it was so bad. And I couldn't believe when there was like a flurry of substitutions made and he managed to survive. I was like, I don't know what's happening here. But he's another one, right? Like, Ange clearly sees something in him because he's been played. It's not like he's completely been dropped. And when he's been on the bench, he's come into those games more often than not. But this is the thing. Ange is going to have to make a decision. If he doesn't think he can play the way he wants, then he will need to maybe move him on, which sounds crazy. But like, that's the sort of decisions that we're going to have to take in the summer. And it's exactly the same with the Lo Celso thing. Look, I was saying before, like, I just think he's pointless, and we've been down this road before. And look, it's really harsh because all footballers who play in the Premier League, all footballers who play semi-professional are really good at football. And the players who play at the very top are ridiculously good. Even the quote-unquote shittest player in the Premier League is absolutely ridiculously good at football. So it's all relative, right? When I say to him, he's crap, he's not good, that doesn't mean I actually mean that literally. What I mean is for what we need him for, the purpose, the level, whatever, right? And with Lo Celso, it's the same issue that I always have is when he comes on and plays well for 3 games, I get people going, see, this is why Lo Celso should play. And I'm like, when he has 12 games, 12, I will say, yeah, great, fine. And I said that after 6 games this season. And he's now, even if you include last night, he's still not had 10 cameos, not even 90 minutes, 10 cameos where he's looked good. So what am I supposed to do with that? Great. He's come on and done well. And he's created 3 chances at the end of a game for a team who are winning 2-0. Fucking whoop-de-doo. Who cares? He has never been consistently good for us. And this is what we do all the time. We hope. I did it with Ndombele relentlessly. I wanted him to be good. So every time he wasn't playing, I'd be like, Ndombele could do a job. He'd be great. We have to let these sort of players go. We have to. If we sign
Mate, it's that time of season, isn't it? It's that time of season when the Ndombele kind of little 3-second bits of video are, great, he skinned a couple of players. Why don't you keep that clip playing and see when he does nothing with it at the end of it? Or
when he's the size of a house turning up for pre-season. It's this sort of thing that I'm like, the solution to these problems, like, should we play the Celso instead of this player, that player? I'm like, look, in the short term, yeah, fine. I'd have no issue. I'm not going to bloody like boo the guy or like kick off on Twitter if Lo Celso's starting. If he starts between now and the end of the season, I hope he plays really well, because that would be great for Spurs, and that's all I care about. I just can't see that as a long-term solution. So that's probably and if Ange doesn't see that either, what's the point of giving him more minutes than he needs to? But yeah, I think we've sort of touched on it here. I think our midfield is the biggest issue. Like, I agree we need rotation. I agree we need a new striker and all that. But actually, if you really think about it, our midfield is non-existent most games. Like, they just very rarely have control. They always seem to be caught out. I think most of the reason that our defense gets completely mauled is because there's no one there screening and like doing that part and being responsible in there. We don't ever seem to pass through midfield anymore like we did at the start of the season. I do think our midfield is actually our biggest issue and is probably the bigger reason why we're really struggling. And that, to me, it seems like everyone's talking about a dribbly boy left winger and rotation. I think those are also really important too. But I think our midfield is pretty bad and I think needs a lot of work. And we all know that will cost shitloads of money. And this comes all the way full back round to, will the club support Ange or any manager in really being ballsy about buying and selling? With selling has been one of our bigger issues. We actually spend reasonable amounts of money. What we do is we don't clear out money. We don't clear out players and create money because it doesn't fit our valuation. But the market doesn't want to pay it. So we hold on to them instead of selling them at a loss and buying new players in. We don't do that.
Coys McCoy's face says, John, get real. Levy is never going to push the boat out to sign a player like Declan Rice. So save your breath, you know.
Yeah, we're agreeing with each other. I'm saying that we should do that, and I don't think we're going to. So, yeah, hard to disagree with that.
Let's have a look. Let's see. We've got a few more. I mean, Juice Nut says Maddison is good, but not top draw. He wouldn't get into top 4 teams. I'm
Squads.
Yeah,
and that's what I'm saying, right? Like we should be aiming for him to be a squad player, because then we have someone who's better than him, and we already admitted he's a pretty good player. So that's the way we should be thinking about it.
Oh, here's a good one then. Spurs Simpson says, John is right. We have too many we hope players, and Bentancur is starting to drift towards that. Now, Bentancur is an interesting one because I do actually think Bentancur is, or at least was, an amazing player, a seriously fantastic player. I mean, he was one of the best players at the World Cup, at least whilst Uruguay were in it. I think statistically he was. The fellas, however, since had 2 serious, and I mean major injuries that we all knew at the time of happening when we heard it was ACL, and I think it was another ACL on the other foot or something horrible anyway he'd had. We were all kind of saying players don't really historically come back from ACLs the same player. Hopefully he will. Fingers crossed he will. And I don't think the jury's out yet on Bentancur, but the signs ain't looking good, mate. The signs ain't looking good. You know, he just doesn't quite have that little je ne sais quoi that he once had, you know?
Yeah, he's lost a bit of the nimbleness and the like.
Mm.
And look, it's completely understandable. Again, I don't want this to sound like I'm like hating on the guy. It's completely understandable. Like you said, those injuries are the worst, and especially for like it's like a hamstring for a striker. An ACL for a centre midfielder is the worst because like everything's happening 360 around them. They need to be able to pivot, stop, turn, twist more than most positions, right? And so, like that injury particularly is really bad. And then you factor in the type of player that he is, who was able to twist and turn and work his way out of space and take risks and stuff. He doesn't seem like he trusts his body yet. And again,
Mm.
completely understandable. And maybe just takes a bit more time. But there are certain moments where I'm like, oh, just just go into that space or go through that tackle or whatever. And he doesn't do it because he's obviously worried about his injury. And I can't blame him for that. It's not actually been that long because he came back early from his injury and got injured again, different injury. So it's still fairly early on. So he is the type of player that I was talking about earlier around those sort of technical players that you should be able to, in a midfield, feel comfortable popping the ball around and just, outpossessing the opposition. But if his level is now this, we have to move him on. And this will be the tricky thing. Like, does the club have the stomach to make decisions on players we've essentially just signed that we think have a huge upside because we now don't think that they can reach their potential? It's the ruthlessness that I haven't seen from us before that we will need if we really want to kick on. And again, I just want to make it clear, I really like Bentancur and I hope that he has a great preseason and next summer we see the player he should be, because it'd just be a shame for football if he doesn't get to reach the levels that he was at before, because he was a joy to watch. But if he doesn't, we have to be ruthless and we have to move players on. And yeah, that remains to be seen if we will.
Where's this? I've got a comment from Idris who says, calling himself Madders suits him well. An immature, petulant name to go with his performances. Yeah, it's quite interesting, quite funny. I just found that funny. Let's have a look. Here's a good one. Ollie Humphrey. Some of the subs last night were insulting. Hill in brackets.
Yeah.
I know we have clear gaps in the squad to address, but the lack of youth integration is a real concern, given that they have the academy playing in the same style setup. And I think that's something that's been echoed a lot by people. There's been some talk about Jamie Donnelly last night in the under 21s, is it, or whatever it is. Let's just say the youth team in their comeback against Nottingham Forest last night, who's kind of hovered around the first team squad, but never really been trusted. Mikey Moore, I know people talk about him being generational. I know they're very, very excited about him. He is 16 years old. Some people would equally argue, well, Wayne Rooney was chucked in at 16 years old. Christian Eriksen, another example of somebody who was playing from about 16 years old. So is it too young? Or if this lad is as good as people say, don't we get more from chucking him on last night as opposed to Brian Hill? Brian Hill, a player who Ange Postecoglou apparently wants to get rid of. What's going on there, mate? What is going on with Ange? Because I think, I will say, out of everything to do with Ange Postecoglou in terms of the worries of this and of that, set piece coaching, yeah, that is a concern. But I think one of the main sort of drags on it for me, one of the main things that's kind of just bogging me down a bit is that lack of youth integration, that lack of the pathway being there, because this was supposed to be something new. This Ange Postecoglou team, it was supposed to be something new. It was supposed to be us looking into the horizon, looking into the kind of clear skies yonder there, that we can envisage this world where Tottenham are not only buying kind of, off the peg, amazing footballers that we can, give everyone a lift that we can get excited behind, that people can buy the shirts of and all that type of thing, but also blooding these apparently amazing young academy players that keep seemingly winning everything at every single level. We're hearing all these reports of Mikey Moore, of Jamie Donnelly, of Iago Santiago, people like that who are supposed to be absolutely unbelievable, yet they're getting nowhere close to the team. And yes, I know we understand that if Tottenham are a team that are trying to win stuff, you can't be blooding youngsters, but even Pep Guardiola's done that at Manchester City. And I know that people are going to talk about Palmer that's gone to Chelsea or whatever, but let's go Phil Foden. He's one of City's main players. He's been playing since he's about 17, hasn't he? About 17, 18 for Manchester City. it feels like there's not that much of an excuse for Ange not to be doing it, especially when there's been periods this season when we've desperately needed more bodies. We desperately needed more energy about the place. And I don't think you're going to get much more energy than young players who are absolutely desperate to play. Apparently, Alfie Devine, who I think has done all right since he's been on loan elsewhere. I've heard less about him, I'll be honest, as the season has gone on, which maybe is indicative of the fact that he's not quite there yet. But still, we've heard in the past players like Alfie Devine who have been banging on the manager's door saying, please play me. I'm desperate to play. I really want to. And I know some people are going to say, well, that's just young players. They need to kind of have their ambition channeled in the right way, and they need to kind of understand that there's a hierarchy and all this type of stuff. But sometimes, you know what football is. You're a proper football man, John. You're a proper football man. You know that sometimes, wallop, you just stick the young lad in there who's born 5 miles away from the training ground. All his family have been season ticket holders. Ryan fucking Mason. Look at Ryan Mason. The second he got his opportunity, and I know he was about 27. Everyone thought he was about 16. He was about 24, 25 when he got his chances under Pochettino. But he'd been gagging for years to play for Spurs. He gave it everything. And yeah, he ended up getting moved on. But for a little period of time, he was so important to the team.
Yeah.
See also Bentaleb. See also Harry Kane. You know, Andros Townsend, some of these other players. Surely there's come a point where we need to start blooding more of these young lads, right?
100%. This is so again, I'll certainly encamp set pieces as a separate discussion, as a completely valid criticism of Ange, right? We can get to that maybe. But the youth things annoyed me all season, and for two reasons. One, practically on the pitch, I'm like, there were times when we had basically no centre backs, and we were trying to like play Royale or Davies as like centre backs when we had at the time. What's the lad that we've sent out on loan to Plymouth? Ashley, whatever his name is, the guy we signed from Blackburn?
Phillips.
Phillips, right? Like people are like, no, he's not ready. He can't play a young centre back. You'll destroy him. I'm like, he's a centre back though. That's his position. Like any team or manager who would allow a centre back, a young centre back, to have a stinker and then crucify them, that's on the manager. It's not on the player. You can't like. I found that astounding that they were like, no, he's too young. I'm like, he's played in the Championship. All right, a handful of games, and the level's way higher in the Premier League. I get all of that. But this idea of like, he can't possibly play them. So what? Centre backs just never play until they're 25. Like, he's got to play at some point. And if he's massive as well, by the way, Phillips. He's not like a little kid. He's not like Brian Hill playing centre back. He is a massive man. So this idea that we couldn't play him, I found weird because we needed a centre back. And that was odd to me. And then other times in the season, you quite rightly said about Hill. I just tweeted last night. Hill is completely pointless. That is that is exactly how I see it. He is pointless. He is so weak and pathetic. And and I know again it's proper football, man. Oh, you can't do that in the Premier League. But in the Premier League, you can't be that weak. You just can't. Like you can't. He looked like an under 14. Like he is pointless. And Ange clearly doesn't rate him. Clearly doesn't like him. And then you've got this Santiago kid ripping it up in the same position, gets nowhere near. We've had times where we've had no creative midfielder, and we've got Donnelly more so than Mikey Moore, just from an age perspective, plays in that position, doing great things. Has been on the bench but hasn't played. I'm like, that's one side, is the footballing side, and this other piece goes hand in hand, is politically, and I mean with the fans and with the club. It's the most easiest win of all time. Because if you have those players come in and we don't win, most fans are like, oh, well, we got to see these youth players. Like, great. You can't do it every week because if you keep losing, people are going to be like, just play the more experienced players, right? But playing one of them with your first team like players, or dropping them in for 20 minutes, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, give them some actual meaningful time, not when it's 7 minutes of extra time because of VAR and you go, oh, go on, then you can have the last 3 of those. Like, that is pointless. I think politically, it just gives you more of a case of people like me who go, this is a rebuild. We're we're a little bit into it, but we're still integrating these younger players because we want to build something for the future, and we can really mold these younger players, and we think they're really talented. The club are going to be like, well, great, because it's just going to raise their value. And so it's like we've got players here that we can If they don't work out, we can sell them for good money. And if they do work out, we just have an asset that we haven't had to pay for, right? There's no downside for the club. So they're going to be interested in that. And then you get to a position where, ideally these players do become useful first team players. And then all of a sudden it's like, maybe you've solved some of these problems, right? We're talking about signing like an attacking midfielder for Maddison. Donnelly suddenly becomes this like unbelievable Dele Alli-esque attacking midfielder, in the same way as like when Palmer went to Chelsea, everyone knew he was a talent, but no one really knew. They didn't really know. They took upon him, and it's like, okay, yeah, no, he is ready. So like, why not try it? And the third thing, which I think is really important, is like you mentioned it before, like Mason, Bentaleb, Kane under Pochettino. That really did help him get over this thing of like, don't set your expectations too high because we've got these young lads who are going to do anything. Now, outside of Kane, all those youth players, they didn't really cut it for his team. They ended up moving on. But it did allow him, it gave him breathing space, it gave him time. And guess what's happening at Chelsea now? All of those expensive signings are out. All he's got are young players, and he's playing them because he has to now. And guess what he's getting? He's getting more breathing space because people are like, oh, well, what's he supposed to do? He's got these young players there. So I just think like all round, it's a very odd decision from him not to do it, because I can't really see any major downsides when you consider that the alternatives are players you don't really fancy or who have never really been good for Spurs.
We're coming towards the end, John. I don't want to keep you for much longer. I did say we were going to do a bit of a Liverpool preview in this, so let's just go to that. Just in the course of us podding, it seems to be that Virgil van Dijk will be missing from this game. Charlie Eccleshare of The Athletic has shared that news, and he's rather cheekily added on to that another grand opportunity for Tottenham Hotspur to capitalise on a team missing one of their best players. We never win at Anfield, do we? I think it is something, honestly, I remember seeing the stat come up on Twitter not long ago, where it's something like, honestly, it was something like 6 times since the sinking of the Titanic, Tottenham have won at Anfield, which is, I mean, it's just, look, people can say it's pessimistic enough, but it's just another write-off fixture, isn't it? It's, what will that be that now? 4 losses on the bounce?
Yeah. I mean, it's not ideal. It's not ideal going into it. Look, again, though, I'll try not to get too, this is a personal thing, I'll try not to get too, like, pre-annoyed about anything. Like, just anything.
How's that
like,
going for you, mate?
Well, it's hard when the games come so close together, right? Because I don't have much time, basically, to get over the post-annoyance before the pre-annoyance kicks in. But yeah, I try not to get too annoyed going, oh, we're going to be rubbish, we're going to lose, this is going to be rubbish, we never, because if that happens, then you're going to deal with it afterwards. So why deal with it any longer than you have to? So I try not to get pre-annoyed, and I'm also always optimistic. I used to have this thing when we were younger as lads. We used to go to like the betting shop after football or before football in the morning, and we'd be putting on like accumulators and stuff. And then if there was like a lunchtime game or an evening game that we were going to watch in the pub, we'd always look through, and I'd always like pick like a centre back. Like, I don't know, it could be like, say it was like Chelsea United. I'd be like, oh, Terry. And then someone would always go, oh, he hasn't scored for months. And I'd be like, well, he's due one then. And then if I picked, someone like, I don't know, Van Nistelrooy to score, I'd always be like, yeah, he's on a great run of form, right? Because whichever way around it is, I can justify the case. And it's exactly like this. I'm looking at this going, well, we never win there. We're due one. Like, we're going to win. It'll be fine. We're just going to win. That's the way I live my life. I'm always optimistic. And yeah, part of me before kickoff, I'll be thinking, this is going to be unbelievable when we win there. This is going to be amazing. This is going to be so good. And then just before it kicks off and they're showing the lineups, I did it last night with Chelsea. I suddenly go, well, they're not that bad though, are they? Like, Palmer's pretty mustard.
All this talk about Chelsea having all these players out.
Yeah. I was like, he's good though. He's really good. And then, so it'll be exactly the same thing. It's just that one sort of minute before kickoff, I have this extreme doubt of like, oh yeah, no, we're going to get pumped. But before that, I'm always optimistic. And also Van Dijk's really good at attacking from corners. So he's not there. So maybe there's only 3 other players to worry about now instead of.
Imagine if the season that we do the double over Liverpool It means absolutely fuck. We do the double over Liverpool en
Yeah.
route to finishing 6th. Like,
That'd be so
not
Spurs.
Champions League final, not when we're in a title race.
No.
None of that. No.
No.
None of
So
that Harry Kane getting to shush the cop or anything like that after they've been going on at him for however long. No.
yeah, no. Don't say it for the one where Wanyama scores one of the best goals you'll ever see in your life. No, don't just concede immediately after that one. No, let's just do the double over them in a completely meaningless, pointless season where we're sort of just sitting, floating at the top half of the table, but not quite doing anything important. Yeah, it would be perfectly Spurs. The only thing that I would really enjoy about it, aside from just winning there, is Klopp's farewell tour just being like
Yeah.
mugged off by Spurs, who they always beat at home. For us to win there and just to see his like little grumpy little face would be
Although
incredible.
still, there's that little bit of him. It's probably like Champions League final, lads. Bother.
Yeah. Oh no,
You know
for
what I mean?
sure. But this is the thing about football, isn't it? It's like
Yeah. He
today's
in
game.
his head, he's like, I ruined all your lives.
Yeah,
Like,
he has as well. Yes.
yeah, you know, I broke Pochettino. I ruined the best ever Spurs team. You're never getting back there again, ever. So
I
have fun
actually,
with that, though.
Jack,
Auf Wiedersehen.
I actually had that thought last night when it went 2-0. And I was just sitting there thinking about Poch, and I was just thinking, well, that was it, wasn't it? That was it. That was the zenith. That was it. After that, like, what's the point? Like, we could have won the Champions League. Are you mental? We could have been singing Champions League, having a laugh. Champions
I
League.
would
You
have
never sing that to
retired.
Arsenal.
Can you imagine ringing around the Emirates, Champions of Europe? You'll never sing that to them. There's nothing they could ever say to you again. We won the Champions League before you did. Fuck off. Don't care about Invincibles. None of that shit.
It was right there. It was right there in our palm of our hand, and we missed out on it because of Klopp and his massive teeth, and that will hurt forever. And I'll never forget over it. And then when people are like, I know all rivalry aside, he's a nice guy. He might be, but I will hate him forever for that. Don't care.
Yeah. Looks
Guilty
like
by
Harold
association.
Shipman.
Yeah.
You seen that the little key ring they made in the club shop? The
No.
Jurgen Klopp key. They made Liverpool made a little Jurgen Klopp key ring, like a cartoon version of him, but it looks identical to Harold Shipman. I'll find it for you and
Brilliant.
send you to afterwards.
He's one of the only people who looks like a real life caricature. So like if a caricaturist drew him, they drew like a real life picture because they'd be like, well, that's the most extreme version of him.
I think the thing I miss about him most is those games when, when they've lost like 2-1 and there's been a stinking decision go against them, an absolutely stinking one. In the back of my head, I'm always like, come on, I want to see him in the post.
Yeah.
And you can tell probably the Sky journal's like, oh, I don't want to talk to him. Go on, you do it. No, I don't want to do it. When they ask him a harmless question, when it's just, so, how do you think today went then, Jurgen? Oh, how do you think it went? You're paid all the money, and you're just like, yes.
The mask is slipping.
Out.
The mask is slipping. Let's go.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Well, let's hope that's what happens.
Yeah.
Is that we get a Brian Hill. He just muscles his way through all their centre backs, smashes one in the top bins in the 90th minute.
He does a Diego Maradona.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, against England in '86. Just run, not the handball one, the other one, the good one. He just runs around the entirety of Liverpool, and then
I sort of hope Van Dijk is playing. So the last player who goes past is Van Dijk, and it's shoulder to shoulder, and he just fucking floors him, bosh, and then just slots it past Alisson, nutmeg, bang.
Another ACL for Dijk on the way down as well. I mean?
Just lands awkwardly, falls underneath him, just collapses. His knees just snap to bits. It would just be absolute scenes. Honestly, if Brian Hill, I'll say this now. If Brian Hill scores the winner against Liverpool at Anfield, I will get a very small Brian Hill scored at Anfield tattoo on my person.
On your buttock?
Yeah. On my ass. It's fine. No one's going to see it.
All right, we've got that here now.
Yeah, clip it up.
So I'll clip that up and I'll put that out, mate. But Jon Bass, it's been a pleasure talking to you today, mate, even if it is in the circumstances of Tottenham having lost after losing to Arsenal. Losing to Chelsea. What a week. What an absolute week. It's the absolute inverse of that week when Gareth Bale did that motorbike celebration after he beat Arsenal, and then Chelsea in 1 week. It's the other way round. So, yeah, thanks a lot, mate. And I'll speak to you soon.
Always a pleasure. Peace.